You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hello, everybody. I am starting us off this week, and today I'm going to be talking about an organism that is a return to a favorite topic for this show. It's a parasite.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
I was
literally just thinking today, we haven't had a good parasite in a while, so thank you so much.
This is a very interesting and unusual one. It's one that has had a serious impact on human lives and history in both positive and negative ways.
Okay.
And, you know, when I say parasite, you're probably thinking of something like a tapeworm. Or if you're a regular listener to this show, you might remember the golden digger wasp, summit disease, and various other strange and disturbing creatures that we've talked about. But, you know, as in summit disease, today's parasite is a fungus. But its target is not an animal, but a plant. So it's hosted by a plant. And yet people are profoundly affected by this parasite as well. There are somewhat obscure references to the effects of this fungus throughout antiquity, but the earliest reference that is for sure believed to refer to it is from a document from the year 857 from what is now Germany. So, quote, "A great plague of swollen blisters consumed the people by a loathsome rot, so that their limbs were loosened and fell off before death."
Oh,
What?
Dramatic, disturbing,
that's dramatic.
horrible.
Wow.
Their
there's an
limbs
image
fall
for you.
off?
Yeah. Any guesses as to what I'm talking about?
No.
It took a 180 from where I thought you were going.
Yeah.
When limbs started falling off. And it's a fungal related thing. So I'm guessing people are probably somehow getting the fungus on something and eating it, and then that's affecting them in some way.
I would help, but my brain is still picturing just what you said, like big like blisters, and then all of a sudden their limbs just fall. Like that's where my brain is.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
You are doing what I thought you were doing in the first place, I think.
Okay.
Did he really see this?
I don't know what.
What do you think it is?
Let me tell you what I'm talking about, and we'll see if we're talking about the same thing. I am talking about ergot.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, so ergot, Latin name is Claviceps purpurea. It affects
Purple.
Some cereal grasses as well as wild grasses. Wheat and barley can be affected, but rye is the most susceptible to this fungus.
Oh, it's starting to ring a bell now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has a fascinating life history. So a fungal spore has to infect the ovary of the flower of the grass. And it actually mimics the way a pollen grain would fertilize the flower.
Okay.
So the spore will germinate, and it actually colonizes the ovary and hijacks the plant's mechanism that's intended to feed the growing seed. And it uses that to produce a sugary, it's called honeydew. So it's a sweet liquid, and it contains asexual spores of the fungus. And the honeydew will obviously attract insects to the plant, which feed on the honeydew, and then they pick up the spores and carry it to other plants. So after a while, the honeydew production will stop, and then the remaining fungal body will harden and darken into the ergot. It's also called the sclerotium. And it's there on the plant in place of the grain of rye that it replaced. And it looks, approximately the same size and shape as a grain of rye, but it's a darker color. It's kind of blackish or purplish. So you can imagine how easy it is for infected plants to have the ergot mixed in with the actual grains. And unfortunately for people and animals, the ergot contains a stew of highly toxic alkaloid chemicals. And people who consume foods that are contaminated will suffer from what's called ergotism. And it takes two main forms.
Okay.
So the one probably maybe that you were thinking of is convulsive ergotism. So victims will have muscle spasms and seizures, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, headaches, mania, and hallucinations, with a mortality rate untreated of 10 to 20%. So that's
Yikes.
great.
That's not good.
Not great.
So even more fun, there's gangrenous ergotism, which is what was referred to in my earlier quote.
Yeah. Gangrene
So-
is no fun.
The compounds work to restrict the blood vessels in the body's extremities. And the skin will peel, there's loss of sensation, there's swelling, and eventually, like literally the fingers, toes, and sometimes even limbs will turn gangrenous and fall off, although without pain. They'll just like separate from the body and boop.
Oh, that is horrifying.
Yeah.
Wait.
It's awful.
It just falls
and
off. Does it bleed?
No, not really. Because
Sort of withers and
the blood vessels are already
peels
all
off and
gone by that point.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
not great.
And there were epidemics of ergotism that happened throughout history, especially in Northern and Eastern Europe, where rye was the major cereal crop.
Sure.
And the link of the disease with the ergot fungus only kind of gradually became clear, but it was well accepted by 1800. In the Middle Ages, there was even an order of monks called the Order of St. Anthony, whose specialty was hospitals that were dedicated to helping victims of ergotism and caring for their stumps. And the disease was also actually known as St. Anthony's fire because St. Anthony of Padua had died of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. Ergotism has actually been proposed as a contributing factor to various historical events, including the French Revolution.
Makes sense.
And there is some fascinating speculation that many of the accusations of witchcraft and witch trials, including in Salem, were due
That's
to ergot
where I've
poisoning.
heard this before. Yes.
Yeah. The convulsive type of ergot poisoning. And the convulsive versus gangrenous was apparently regional, and they're not exactly sure why. But I want to talk a little more about the chemicals. So the really interesting thing is that it's obviously toxic, but toxic substances often have the highest potential as drugs. You know, there's the saying, the dose makes the poison.
Yeah.
In the case of ergot, it had one extremely useful quality in addition to obvious problems. So it was used to produce uterine contractions. And it was in use as an abortion drug, as well as controlling excessive periods and helping deliver the placenta after childbirth for centuries.
Okay.
And it would also stop lactation.
That's good.
But, it's hard to get the dose right. So
Yeah.
there were some problems with using ergot in that way, but it was very widely used, especially in the 19th century. Understandably, when analytic chemistry became more sophisticated starting in the 20th century, there was a lot of interest in kind of untangling all these compounds in ergot and seeing what use could be made of them. And there are actually at least a dozen medically active compounds that can be derived from it. Ergometrin is, it's the derivative it's the one compound that causes the uterine contractions, and that was first isolated in 1932 and continues to be an extremely important medication in childbirth. There are other compounds that are used to treat conditions as diverse as migraine and Parkinson's disease. But the most notorious derivative of ergot has got to be LSD. And
Yeah, see now, this is what I was getting at when at the beginning you described these horrible things happening, and I was like, did he actually see it? Or was he having an hallucination?
No, he actually saw it.
I thought that's where you were going with this whole
That's
thing.
what you were talking about. Yeah. So LSD.
This is the fungus I thought you were talking about.
Yeah. LSD is a synthetic derivative of lysergic acid, which is a compound that can be produced from ergot. So it's like a couple generations out from an actual compound in ergot, but it is made from it, or used to be, originally was. And it was first synthesized in 1938. There's a whole fascinating history of the use of LSD, which I would love to get into, but I'm already going pretty long here, I think. So maybe another time. But luckily for us, rye is heavily monitored these days, and so ergot is practically non-existent in developed countries, although outbreaks still occasionally occur in underdeveloped countries. But you can eat your rye bread without any fear.
That's good. I would like to keep my limbs.
Yeah.
What an image.
Okay.
And that's what I have this week.
The limbs falling off, is it not? Yeah, I can't get over that.
Yeah, that's awful.
Oh, man,
We're going to have a little break to recover from those images, and
Thank you. No, I have to go then?
Yeah.
then it'll be Kirk's turn.
Pull myself together after that. Oh.
Strange by Nature podcast is brought to you by listeners like you who have joined the Society of Strange, our membership group on over at patreon.com/strangebynature. Society of Strange members can join at one of 3 different membership levels and help support the show, and also get some fun stuff like water bottle stickers or access to super secret content. So thank you to those who have joined already to help make this podcast possible. If you haven't joined yet, we'll see you soon over at the Society of Strange at patreon.com/strangebynature. See you soon.
Welcome back. As sometimes happens when winter drags on and never seems to want to leave the Northland, my wife asks the inevitable question, why do we live here?
As someone who moved even further north, and there's still
Yeah, you went further north.
like 2 feet of snow on the ground. Why?
Why? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's a fair question. It's cold in the winter, hot and humid in the summer. We have tornadoes, mosquitoes the size of bison. You get the picture. But I always feel like, look, every place has a downside, right?
Right.
But this year, my wife, who enjoys passing the time by looking at like architecture and houses via sales listings, started like dreaming and sending me like Zillow postings for cool houses in warm places. And the first one was literally in the high desert.
No.
So you can, I think, see where her mind was on a cold winter day. And I was looking at it and I thought it looked cool, but like, I felt like you'd be likely to burst into flames within minutes.
Well, yeah.
In the summertime.
Yeah.
So I'm like, not going to happen. And it turns out I spectacularly missed the point of her cold weather dreaming. And I proceeded to effectively point out every flaw with living in this new location. And it probably wasn't my shiniest moment, but I think it motivated her to like change her search parameters and take on the challenge of finding a house in a location that met all of my magical criteria for a perfect place.
Okay.
And it turns out she found a pretty idyllic town in Northern California that we had actually visited before that pretty much checked all the boxes, She even found an amazing looking house for sale. And I admitted that she had won our game and found what seemed to be a pretty amazing place to live. And before you get too excited, though, the house is over $1 million and we aren't moving anytime soon. Fun exercise, though. And it got me thinking about the different sort of challenges people face depending on where they live. So I was trying to figure out the downside of this little town, and I couldn't think of much at first, but I did come up with one little tiny inconvenience.
Wildfires?
They get earthquakes.
Yeah, I was thinking in like earthquakes, right?
Probably wildfires too, but that's for a different episode here. Now, I live in one of the most geologically stable places on Earth, so earthquakes are not part of my life. I looked it up though, and this small town has had close to 40,000 earthquakes recorded.
No.
Since the 1930s when they started to monitor them.
No.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Tornadoes you can see coming.
Yeah, but in all fairness, most of those are so small that you would not even feel them, right?
I don't
So
care.
I did find a cool website where you can enter any location, and then it gives you the odds of different magnitudes of earthquakes for that location. And the town in question has a 90% chance of a 5.0 or greater earthquake in the next 50 years.
No.
And it lists the odds of even bigger quakes, although, of course, the odds diminish as you go up. The scale is logarithmic, so like a 6 earthquake, which would be very destructive, and 10 times the power of a 5, had a 58% chance in the next 50 years.
Okay.
So 6 and up is where you start to get like major building damage. So, not great.
Okay.
And now, not living in earthquake country, it got me wondering, how big can earthquakes get?
Right.
Right. And like, what's the biggest ever?
Wasn't it
What's
like
the limit on that?
9.2 or something?
It was somewhere in there.
Well, we're about to find out.
Oh,
I
good.
mean, not personally. I'm just going to tell you.
Oh, good.
Like, I was wondering though, like, have we ever gotten to 10? But
I
so
hope not.
we have 2 candidates. We have 2 candidates for kind of the biggest ever. And the first up is the Valdivia quake in 1960 in Chile.
Yeah.
And it came in at a magnitude 9.5.
9.5.
9.5. And this was a megathrust event just off the coast of southern Chile. And because the quake was underwater off the coast, most of the damage done came in the form of a tsunami.
Yeah. I remember,
yeah.
I visited Hawaii when I was a kid. And I remember hearing about the tsunami in Hilo, which I think was from that quake, 1960.
There you go. Yeah. So like any kind of natural disaster, the numbers of fatalities are challenging to pin down. But between the quake and the tsunami, somewhere between 490 and 5,700 people died in Chile alone. And arguably worse than those who died were the number of people who left homeless just because of the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
The Chilean government estimated 2 million people lost their homes.
That's insane.
And the damage, what I could find, cost $550 million. But I believe those were like the numbers of the cost back in 1960. So I did a little math and figured that would be $5 billion today.
Right.
Oh my God.
In damage just to that one country.
Yeah.
So the tsunami traveled across the world. In Hawaii, like you mentioned, the tsunami caused 61 deaths and 43 injuries and did $23.5 million in damage just in Hawaii.
Oh my gosh.
On the west coast of the U.S., there was actually 2 deaths and $1 million in damage. And it's not even really where it hit the worst.
Yeah.
A day later, the tsunami had traveled across the ocean, and then it hit Japan, where there were 139 deaths, and it destroyed 3,000 houses.
Wow.
So
That's nuts.
we're talking about something just
planet.
Exactly, so enormous. There were waves 10 meters high in New Zealand and Hawaii. So this was a global event. It had what's called the highest run-up, meaning how high above sea level the water reached, and that was in Chile, and that was 25 meters. So that's 82 feet. So if you were in an 80-foot building on the coast, it could conceivably have been underwater.
That's nuts.
Which,
inconceivable.
yeah, and then you think how far up not up the coast, but inland that water would travel. It all depends on how quickly the elevation goes up, but just astounding. Now, I did say that there were 2 candidates, right?
Oh, no.
There were a number of articles that came out actually last month on this very topic, and I think they all said that scientists have discovered the largest earthquake and tsunami ever. And archaeologists working around the world found evidence of a huge tsunami 3,800 years ago. There were boulders washed far inland in New Zealand, and there was a corresponding evidence in Chile of a massive tsunami that caused people living there to abandon the coastline for 1,000 years.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is crazy. Researchers think that it was also a megathrust quake a little further to the north, and they put the estimate at magnitude 9.5.
Wow.
So, in other words, it was right on par with the 1960s quake, and I'm not sure why, but so many media outlets repeated this idea that it was the biggest ever. And a number of the articles I looked at actually referenced a Live Science article with the headline, "Scientists Find Evidence for Biggest Earthquake in Human History." So it could be that Live Science was like kind of the first ones to put this out there and make that claim. And then it was just repeated again and again by other like sources and media outlets, and they started sort of quoting each other. Like I saw some of them were like, according to Live Science, and it was like they weren't looking actually at the history to figure out was it the biggest, and like they were citing evidence of like, oh, but the waves reached New Zealand, and you're like, yeah, the waves in 1960 reached Japan, like, you know. So it was like it's just kind of like, come on, you guys,
do your research,
be better journalists. So according to the USGS, 9.5 is pretty much the biggest quake possible. We can't ever have a 10, and it's because the strength of an earthquake corresponds to how much of a fault line moves. And the 1960 megaquake and the one from 3,800 years ago both involved about 1,000 kilometers of fault, all thrusting at one time.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a massive, you know, bit of land moving. And I guess apparently due to how fault lines, the way they are, basically, scientists see this as like the longest break that could occur. So we luckily will probably never see a 10.0 earthquake just because there's not a piece of land big enough that can thrust all at once to cause it.
That's good.
So yeah, that's positive.
I like that.
So my sources this week were the U.S. Geological Survey. And if you want to know more about the newly discovered 9.5 quake and tsunami from 3,800 years ago, I'd recommend the original journal article, which is called "Did a 3,800-Year-Old 9.5 Earthquake Trigger Major Social Disruption in the Atacama Desert?" And that was in the journal Science Advances.
Right.
And I guess Zillow is also a source this week.
Well, thanks, Kirk. Earthquakes already freaked me out. Now they will remain so.
Up next will be Rachel, and we can't wait to hear what she has to say.
It's a mystery. All right, everybody. So I'm pretty sure I referenced this earlier in your segment, Kirk, that I moved even further north to
you did
pretty interesting spot, and I'm not gonna say exactly where or anything, but
north of Duluth.
Yeah.
South of the North Pole.
Yes. But I was thinking about it, and there's a really interesting phenomenon that happens up here. And since this is episode 66, I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit devilish and talk about something that has actually stumped two-thirds, yeah. Something that stumped people for generations. And I wanted to talk about the mystery that was Devils Kettle Falls in northern Minnesota.
Oh, yes. Oh, awesome.
So for those of you who don't know, Devils Kettle is a series of waterfalls that is in Judge C.R. Magny State Park. The reason why I want to talk about this and why it's called Devil's Kettle is so this river, actually it's the Brule River, and what happens is it goes over these rocks. Now in northern Minnesota, we haven't really talked about it, but Minnesota has really interesting geology, which I'm not going to get into too much today, but northern Minnesota especially actually has a lot of, is sitting on in very, 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 very ancient, no longer active volcano, because there is lots of volcanic rock up here in northern Minnesota. It actually makes for really interesting, like, that's why it's so mountainous and such up here, or one of the many reasons why it's mountainous. There's about maybe an inch of topsoil or so. There's not much topsoil up here. And then right underneath that is all bedrock and granite. It is all volcanic type rock, which makes it really hard to grow anything up here. But it is, and I mentioned this for a distinct reason. And it's because this waterfall is going over that granite, and it splits into two. And one side, the east side of the river, plummets 50 feet into just a normal pool and going down into the river with everything else. And the other side goes into a hole in the rock and seemingly vanishes.
It disappears.
Because it's a hole in like the rock itself, and then the rest of the waterfall goes on. No idea where it would be.
Yeah, and it's a big waterfall, and you feel like that water's got to come out somewhere.
Yeah, it has
to. It's like two giant side-by-side waterfalls, and one of them just vanishes.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, it must be like seeping its way through and getting to Lake Superior that way or something. It's like, no, there's no. It's
a lot of water.
It's a lot of water. There's no it's rhyolite. There's no lava tubes or anything like that underneath the riverbed. So that it wouldn't seep through or anything like that. So a lot of people have been trying to figure out where all this water goes. So what they would do, a lot of people have done over many generations, they will toss like a stick or ping pong balls. One man actually like went down into the tube like 26 feet.
Oh, wow.
Like rappelled in. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Wow, that seems like a really bad idea.
It was not a smart.
Hopefully not when it's raining.
And he rappelled in and he didn't see anything. Like it just vanished. And he couldn't even see the bottom or anything like that, which is crazy. Yeah, he rappelled 26 feet down and couldn't see the bottom. I wouldn't do that. You couldn't make me.
And you feel like if you were 26 feet down in there and there was a bottom nearby, the water would be hitting it and splashing back up at you. Like,
yeah,
that volume of water, it has to go somewhere.
Yeah, and it's not like a little trickle either. Like this is a pouring waterfall. This is a true waterfall. So people have been trying to figure out what it could be. I guess people have even thrown like road signs in there to see if it comes out some other way. Just to see maybe like they'll go to like Lake Superior or whatever and they'll see if they can find it out there. And like, okay, first of all, Lake Superior isn't going to give up any secrets.
If I were going to choose something to throw down the hole to try to trace the flow of the water, it wouldn't be a road sign.
Yeah, they've done GPS trackers too to no avail.
There may have been some beer involved in that one.
Yeah. However,
wait, they tried what? They did what to no avail?
GPS trackers.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, it does. But they tossed GPS trackers in there too.
The public has done that, or scientists?
The public.
Okay, I was hoping scientists would know that they have to be able to see the sky to work.
Yeah, that's why they didn't. And it's volcanic rock. It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. Okay, so, just clarifying there.
But in
when we get into like the serious scientists,
right? Absolutely. So there's been a lot of different like thoughts and reasons or what on earth could be happening. So in 2017, the DNR, so the Department of Natural Resources, actually it was the mapping hydrologist Jeff Green decided, well, maybe instead of it just disappearing through some sort of hidden channel or whatever, maybe it just resurfaces downstream later. Like it rejoins the Brule River. Right. So what they decided to do was to measure the volume of the water that was flowing above Devils Kettle using like stream equipment and measure that volume. And that was it was 123 cubic feet per second. That's how much water was going into Devil's Kettle. And then they went further downstream, like several hundred feet below the waterfall, where like the rest of it kind of just connects up and everything. They measured the water down at that end, and that was flowing at about 121 cubic feet per second. And before people point out, well, it's missing, evaporation happens. Water goes out of the river too, and like can get caught into little pools and such like that too, or get caught on the rocks and such. But it essentially in science, that's about the same number, especially when accounting for the equipment and such too. Like there's a standard deviation. Yep. So that pretty much, there's no loss of water below where the kettle is. So the water from the kettle is just rejoining the river underneath the kettle. So that mystery has been solved.
Well, the world is a less mysterious place now, I guess.
I mean, a little bit. I will say...
Do they know how the kettle was formed?
No idea.
I mean, we have a lot... There are glacial kettles,
in
Minnesota, so it could be...
I mean, it is
That's a whole other topic for another show, I guess.
I mean, you think about it, the waterfall itself, I'm sure it was just erosion. You have that much water, hitting one spot as it goes over. Eventually it would eventually erode it away over millions of years,
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say about this is they actually, even though they use the water testing equipment, they did have a thought that they wanted to pour a vegetable-based dye into the pothole to see.
That's what I was going to say. I was surprised they didn't. I know people have done that in other places.
Right, and it was fluorescent and biodegradable, visible at 10 parts per billion. They were about to do it when it was a little bit lower flow in the fall, and the DNR said no, so they didn't get to do it.
Oh.
Cause I mean,
there probably was a good reason, but
it was more or less you have the evidence you needed. You don't need to do this additional experiment. Meanwhile, the scientists and everybody else is no. Let's pour it.
We want to see this.
That would be super cool. We want to do it.
We're gonna double check it. We're gonna have some dye and just see how it goes. Why not? Yeah, no, they. It said no. As far as all of the different objects and things that have been thrown in Devil's Kettle, the amount of force and everything that's in there, the force of the water very easily for ping pong balls and things like that and sticks. They're just gone. It destroys the ping pong balls. It will destroy sticks. It's not holding it underwater or anything like that. Those things, they're just gone. They're in itty little bits.
Ooh, don't fall in.
No, don't fall in. That would be bad. Oh, good. Lovely. But that's what I have for you both today. The not so much mystery of Devil's Kettle.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.